Hi, guys. Senator Jay Costa and Senator Wayne Fontana here in Harrisburg.
Hello, Senators. I'm David Payne from Radio Pennsylvania in Harrisburg.
David, how are you today, buddy?
Pretty good.
Good. So thank all of you for coming over and to talk about with us my colleague, Senator Wayne Fontana. My name is Jay Costa. I serve as Democratic leader. Together, Senator Fontana and I represent the city of Pittsburgh. And more recently, we're very disturbed to learn about some of the activities, as were reported by the Pittsburgh Tribune Review, about the lack of financial oversight and the records that have been destroyed by the executive director of the ICA. To that end, after reviewing that and having conversations with my colleague, Senator Fontana, and others, we together are calling it on the ICA board to do a couple of things. Our approach is to address the ICA board, but also talk to you about implementing legislation that would amend Act 11 of 2004 that would create greater accountability. The first thing I think we believe needs to be done is that the ICA should act immediately to remove the executive director from his position, given that he has indicated that he has removed and destroyed a series of very important financial records that document the activities of the ICA over the course of the past several years. Together, we have also been in contact with our Allegheny County District Attorney, Stephen Zappala, as well as the Office of the Attorney General, and asking them to look into a criminal investigation to see whether or not there's any criminality that exists in this process. We simply don't know that by the reports that have been filed or from the audit that was done by the Auditor General previously. So we think it's appropriate to determine what exactly has been done with respect to the resources that have come from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania over the course of the past almost 12 years now, 11 years. So those are two of the very immediate things that we're asking to be done. Beyond that, we're asking that, and we're working on legislation that would amend Act 11 of 2004, which is the ICA Act, to do a number of things. We believe there needs to be more transparency and openness along those lines. So our provisions would strengthen the transparency and the openness of the records. We would require record keeping at a minimum that meets the standards of other state agencies and address governance issues that were raised by the Auditor General in his recent report. Legislation will also require the ICA to adopt a records retention policy at a minimum which is consistent with the record retention policy of the Department of the Office of Administration. This record retention policy requires most financial information to be maintained for a minimum of 4 years. However, tax information and payrolls and audits must then be retained for at least 7 years. It would also require the Auditor General to do a forensic audit. In addition to that, in addition to the one that they most recently committed, a much more detailed and in-depth audit we believe needs to be done. Specifically to determine what the current fund balances were at the ICA, and the money that has been held by the ICA that should be allocated to the city of Pittsburgh. What is the amount? What are the totals that remain? To try to also determine and look at what the nature of the expenses that have been incurred and the contracts that were entered into by the ICA over this period of time. Moving forward, we would require that the ICA file reports on the financial aspects of their operations, including ledger sheets, contracts, any type of agency entry, and reports on allocations that are made to Pittsburgh from the gaming revenue that they receive with the Department of DCED, and also be responsible for filing reports with the General Assembly as well on an annual basis. Later, the ICA would be required to maintain a public accessible internet website that provides for the most complete records possible, the financial records, and having them posted online so folks will have the opportunity to review them. Specifically, that we are concerned about the fund balance that the ICA should be holding on behalf of the city of Pittsburgh, and we're working to try to ascertain what that is and how those dollars need to be allocated and resourced back to the city of Pittsburgh. And then even the outcome of the conversation with regard to the existence of the ICA as it moves forward, we recognize that there is a petition pending with DCD. In the event that that petition is denied, then this legislation would be implemented. But then beyond that, at some point when the ICA goes away, and we don't know when that'll be, that the direct direction of those dollars from the gaming funds, the $10 million, we would believe, and we believe that the legislation will say that it needs to be directed into the city's pension system going forward and not through any agency like the ICA or any other agency. Those are some of the things that we've asked for and we'll be asking for in legislation and encouraging the DA to look at, as well as the AG, as well as encouraging the auditor, the ICA board to remove the current executive director for some of the things that have been reported recently and replace that person with an interim person who's going to be able to provide the opportunity to do the things that need to be done to fulfill the concerns that have been raised by the people of the city of Pittsburgh and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Now I ask Senator Fontana if he wants to add to that conversation.
Thank you. I certainly agree with everything Senator Costa talked about, but as you may know, I have had legislation, Senate Bill 1024, to eliminate the ICA in the past. So I don't want to sit here and say I told you so, but at the same time, these things have come to light and they're very disturbing. So, in lieu of elimination, I certainly support what's happening, what we like to see happen going forward. Certainly the termination of Mr. Sciortino, the investigation by the District Attorney's Office and the Auditor General, and certainly DCD to set parameters for retention policy and also oversight. These things are so important, I think, to the residents of the city of Pittsburgh. They deserve to have the oversight. They deserve to have a transparency for this board. But if it doesn't work out, I would hope that we would look at some elimination down the road if this doesn't get implemented and get implemented fast and quickly and certainly efficiently. So as I'm in total agreement with Senator Costa's what he said here today, I certainly hold back the idea of maybe at some point eliminating the ICA in the future. Thank you.
That being said, we happy to answer any questions that you guys might have. Brad.
Jay, what potential criminality is there in destroying records and the other things that he's done or admitted to doing? Where's there?
Well, we don't know because we don't have the records to ascertain that, and I don't believe that the Auditor General's office had the full extent of the records available to be able to determine that. But if there were resources that were expended on behalf of the outside the scope of what the authority through the ICA Act, Act 11, then I think that needs to be determined. We don't know what was done with those resources and those dollars and what contracts were entered into. And until we have an opportunity to review that, I think we have to have somebody look at it, and whether it be in a forensic audit or maybe a criminal review remains to be seen. There may not be anything inappropriate or illegal or any criminality with respect to what was done, but without the records, without the appropriate level of review, we simply don't know that.
How will you reconstruct that theoretically if you don't have the records?
Well, I think that's what investigators and what forensic auditors do, and I think we would leave it to them to be able to determine what manner that they are able to do that to the extent that they can. But I'm not suggesting that simply by not keeping records is illegal, but it's questioning whether or not what was done with those proceeds as to whether or not they were used in the appropriate manner is what we have to ascertain.
Any questions from anyone on the phone?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. This is Elaine from KQD Radio. I joined late. Who specifically are you asking to dismiss Henry Sciortino?
We're recommending that the ICA board immediately remove the executive director and replace them with an interim person who would then take up the charge of working to assist whatever agency is doing the review, whether it ends up being the Auditor General's office, the DA's office, or the AG's office, to assist them in compiling as much of the information as possible as a point person. Because you recall, there's no staff other than Mr. Sciortino. And we need to make sure that, you got a volunteer board that exists. We think it's appropriate to have somebody interim there to work along those lines to help facilitate that immediate review and that forensic audit that needs to be done to determine exactly what happened and whether or not resources were expended beyond what was legally permitted.
Do you have any concerns that maybe some of the city's gaming revenues are missing or not there? Any concerns about the money that's being withheld by the ICA that belongs to the city?
Again, Elaine, we simply don't know what we don't know. And I think that's part of the problem. We don't know whether or not the resources exist there, what the bank accounts show, whether there's an appropriate reconciliation. If you don't have that documentation to show that, that remains to be seen. And that's what we're trying to get to the bottom of.
I think it's part of the reason why we'd like to see the Auditor General be part of the investigation to make sure that the funds are there and that other funds were, appropriated in the way they were supposed to be. So that's a big part of the investigation that we'd like to see happen.
Did you get any preliminary feedback from the district attorney or the attorney general's office as to whether they would?
I think the DA's office would certainly be interested in looking at this matter, is my understanding.
Now, how have you contacted the ICA board? Are they now aware of your recommendation, and have they gotten back to you in any?
No, we are in the process of communicating that to the ICA. I have my appointment. I will be communicating it directly to we will be communicating it directly to each of the board members, our specific request.
And Mr. Sciortino was appointed by the governor, is that correct?
He was appointed initially by the board, I guess theoretically, back in, I think, 2004, and has since remained as part of the board as its executive director. But I'm not sure if it's specifically, Brad, if it was the Governor Rendell, or whether it was the board that officially, but it could have been Rendell.
I just wonder whether this governor could recall him.
It possibly could, yeah. But I'm not sure, though, whether or not Sciortino retains his ability to stay there because of the board. The board members vote on that, so. Yeah. But I don't know whether the governor can recall him or not. That's something we'll look into.
I mean, theoretically, if they wouldn't.
If they wouldn't get rid of him,
Right.
yeah. So I guess that would be an option, because the governor has an appointee there as well.
So you've requested that the Auditor General conduct a forensic audit. Have you also communicated with the Allegheny County DA's office?
Yes, we've communicated with them our interest in having them review the matter, yes. And they're interested in reviewing it. But I'm not speaking for them. You'd have to talk to Steve directly, Elaine.
Okay.
Any other questions on the phone? Brad or Karen, you're awfully quiet. Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys for coming over. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.